Welcome, everyone. In this explainer, we're going to take a close, objective look at a series of documents written by an author named Jonathan. Now, our goal here is simply to present the information that he's laid out, sticking strictly to what's actually inside his work.
So, to really get a handle on this, we're going to break it all down into 5 main themes. We'll start by introducing a core concept he calls DOGE. Then we'll dive into the gatekeeping allegation. After that, we'll identify who he accuses of being in this in-group. We'll look at the massive scope of the conspiracy he describes. And finally, we'll cover the framework he proposes for making sense of it all.
Okay, let's jump right in with Section 1. This is where Jonathan really sets the stage by introducing the central idea of his entire set of documents, a concept he's named DOGE.
So what exactly is DOGE? Well, according to Jonathan, the acronym stands for the Department of Gatekeeping Everything. This term is really the cornerstone for the entire argument he builds throughout his writings.
Now, he's very clear that this is not some literal government department. Instead, he describes it as a concept, a gatekeeping operation. And its purpose, according to his documents, is designed to control public perception and help you, John Q. Public, figure out who the good guys versus bad guys are.
All right, so with that definition in mind, let's move on. How does this DOGE idea form the basis of his central allegation of systemic gatekeeping? This next section is all about that, who he claims is being targeted, and maybe more importantly, why.
According to Jonathan's research, this whole process targets a very specific demographic. His documents allege that there's a coordinated effort to screen out white, non-Jew individuals from getting roles in government and NGOs based on their race, religion, and what they might know.
And this, of course, leads to the big question, which Jonathan poses directly in his writing. So now, the question becomes, why? This question really acts as a pivot point where he starts to explore the motivations he sees behind this alleged system.
He actually puts forward 2 primary reasons. The first, to hide just how badly this in-group has supposedly been taking advantage of the public. The second reason he suggests is that the corruption is so obvious from the inside that they absolutely cannot allow any outsiders in to see it. And his own conclusion in the document? He says he leans heavily toward the answer being both.
Okay, so that brings us to the next logical question, right? Who does Jonathan claim is actually behind this whole operation and benefiting from it? This is where his documents shift from the what and why and really start to focus on the who.
What's interesting is that before he names any specific groups, Jonathan first outlines a set of behaviors he attributes to this in-group. He describes them as being intellectually dishonest, applying rules only when it's convenient for them, and actively attacking anyone he considers a truth-teller. He even claims they create their own threats, like campus protests, just to justify their power.
And then he gets very specific. As you can see right here, his documents explicitly list the venture capital firms, foreign interests, and other groups he believes are served by this system. This table is a direct reflection of the names mentioned in his work.
From here, the claims laid out in the documents really expand in scope. I mean, they take this alleged group and connect them to a whole host of major historical and current events. It really paints a picture of a conspiracy that, according to him, is incredibly far-reaching.
Just look at this list. According to Jonathan, this isn't something new. He links this group's influence to some of the most significant events in modern American history. We're talking about the JFK and RFK assassinations, the 9/11 attacks, and what he calls a subsequent takeover of the U.S. financial system. He even connects them to the creation and cover-up of COVID, which he labels a bioweapon, the FTX crash, and the alleged theft of multiple U.S. elections. And the list just keeps going, extending right up into very recent incidents. The allegations include the SVB collapse, alleged arson causing the LA fires, what he calls a directed energy weapon attack in Lahaina, and even things like disaster relief sabotage and the fraudulent use of AI in healthcare that he claims has led to patient deaths. So after laying out this pretty staggering landscape, what's the solution? Well, Jonathan doesn't just leave it there. He concludes his documents by offering a framework, a method he says his readers can use to navigate this information environment and find the truth for themselves. He outlines the 6-step process for personally vetting information. He says to always ask, according to whom, and of course, to follow the money. He suggests noting inconsistencies on platforms, who gets promoted versus who gets silenced. He also says to watch who exposes original, incriminating content, and observe who the big mouthpieces engage with versus who they ignore.
Finally, he says to contrast those with a real struggle against the in-group with those who seem to have identical, simultaneous hardships.
And to really ground his perspective, he ends by citing this famous quote from Sun Tzu. If you know your enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. For Jonathan, this seems to be the key takeaway, that understanding the situation he's described is the most critical step to overcoming it.
And that brings us to the end of our objective breakdown of Jonathan's documents. We've covered everything from his definition of DOGE to the framework he proposes for finding the truth. So we'll leave you with this one final question to think about. What is the ultimate takeaway when one perspective is presented as a complete, systemic explanation for world events?